This video is going to cover a lesson that I thought would meet one of the ITSE standards. So the ITSE standard that I chose to do was the 2008 standard number 1. And that standard read that teachers should be able to facilitate and inspire student learning and creativity. And then one of the indicators that indicates that this standard has been met is the teacher's ability to engage students in exploring real-world issues and solving authentic problems using digital tools and resources. Basically, it's using technology to do authentic learning experiences. So my plan for this lesson would be to use acid-base chemistry content knowledge in order to allow students to use technology to do an authentic learning experience. And so our authentic learning experience would be based around stomach acid and just the biological process of you digesting your food. So obviously your stomach, in order to digest food, has to have acid in it in order to help break down some of the essential nutrients that your body needs to function on a daily basis. And that acid is one that we see a lot in chemistry. It's hydrochloric acid, which is a strong acid that dissociates completely in water, which comes in really important later in this lesson. So in order to have a healthy functioning stomach, you need to have a pH of 2 to 3. However, if you go any more acidic than 1.5, you can start to have stomach ulcers, which obviously is a problem. And so the goal of this assignment is to have students determine whether or not a sample of stomach acid is at a healthy level or not, and if not, how to fix it. Okay, so here's the lesson. So the first thing students need to do is they need to research reputable sources, and they need to find out what a healthy level of stomach acid is and what an appropriate concentration of stomach acid might be. And then once they've done that, the students will then need to set up an acid-base titration. Okay, and they're going to do that to figure out what the pH of a quote-unquote stomach acid sample is. In our case, it will just be an unknown sample of hydrochloric acid that I produce ahead of time. Students will then use their content knowledge of household bases to determine a home remedy. So that will give them some temporary relief until they're able to go in and get medical attention. So one of your common household bases that you see a lot is baking soda. Baking soda, when you consume it, is not harmful to your body like many of the strong bases, and so you could safely consume enough of that to regulate the pH of your stomach until you're able to go in and get medication in order to help your body self-regulate. So the technology being used in this lesson would include Google Sheets, which is part of the Google Suite. It's a web app that allows students to not only record data, but then use mathematical functions to analyze that data without having to do a lot of calculations. One of the other important features for this lesson is the fact that it can use a scatter plot function to plot data that students have marked. The other piece of technology that the students will use during this lesson is a pH meter. And this digital pH meter will allow them to track and record the pH of their sample as they add more and more of the base to their stomach acid sample. So the Google Sheets that student might use will probably look a little something like this. So the first two things that they're going to need to do is to record data from their acid-base titration. And the way that's going to look is they're going to have a column to collect data about the volume of the base that they used to neutralize the acid. And then the other column is going to be their dependent variable, which is how the pH of the acid changes as we add base to it. And so they can use these two columns to track what happens to the pH as they add base to it. And this will help them figure out what the concentration of the stomach acid was. So once they've determined the number of moles of acid that was in their starting sample, all they need to do to figure out the concentration is take this value and divide it by the total volume of the end sample. So that would be the 1 milliliter of acid they started with and then adding 20 milliliters of the base. So they would have a total volume of 20 at the end. And so the way they would do that is they'd come up here, and again, they would input a function. And so they would click equals, then they would highlight the number of moles, and then they would divide by the number of milliliters, which they would have to convert to liters first. But it would be 0.2 liters. And so they get a concentration of 0.0475. And so then, in order to convert that to an acid, they would use the equation that they would know, and it's negative log of the concentration. And so after closing that off, they would get a value of a pH of 1.3. And then based on their research, they would understand that that is about 2/10 below what a healthy stomach should be at, and they're in the ulcer range. For students that would have a hard time visualizing these numbers in their head and getting meaning out of it, Sheets allows them to do another function which would help especially visual students learn this stuff. And so what that will allow them to do is they can create a graph. And so what they'll do is they'll go in and they'll go to insert chart. And once they've got this blank chart, they'll go up here and they'll decide that they would like to put in a scatter plot since their data is in the form of data points. And so what this allows them to do is we can go through, we can select the different data points that would be used in this graph. And so what we'll do is we will select the range that we would like the data in. So we'll start there and we'll go down to this set of data. We'll click OK. And as you can see, this prints us a nice, pretty titration curve. And so students will be able to look and say, okay, the equivalence point should be right in the middle of the graph. And so they'll see that right here at 7, and they'll go over and they'll be able to find that the volume of titrant they used was right around 19 milliliters. And so then they can go over here and they say, oh, okay, well, here we go. At 19 milliliters, we reach the equivalency point. And that's just another way that Sheets can provide a visual aid to help those students who need a little bit more of a visual cue in order to get them onto the right track. And so the strengths of this lesson, they include the fact that there's less chance for math errors. When you are allowing the computer to do those calculations 30 to 40 times, rather than the students having to do it by hand 30, 40 times, you are limiting the number of silly mistakes or moved decimal places, things that will completely throw off the data and inhibit learning. It's not that the students don't know how to do the calculations. However, if you have to repeat the same process 30 to 40 times, that opens the door to silly math errors that, again, are just going to impede learning. And so this eliminates the chances for that. The other thing that it does is that this follows the same process that would be used in the medical field. So if somebody goes in as they're having stomach issues that is causing internal bleeding, so one of the first things that a doctor is going to do is they're going to take a stomach acid sample and then they're going to titrate it just like we did in our lab. So this is giving students who maybe would like to go into the biomedical field, students who might go into a chemistry field, it gives them a real application of how to use their knowledge that they're learning that they could go out and they could use in the field. And I think that not only is that a valuable skill for them, but it also is going to increase the amount of engagement that students have with the content. Finally, a third strength is that it's giving students practice with an awesome, versatile, free application that they can use in the future. Google Suites is a set of apps that students don't have to pay for. Even once they get out of high school and are no longer under the district subscriptions for software, they will not have to pay for this. This is all free material. If students would rather use the Microsoft version in an Excel, they would then have to pay for a Microsoft Office subscription. And so giving students practice with a free software eliminates the need to have to go and learn brand new software when they get out of high school. Now this lesson does have a weakness, and that weakness is that Google Sheets is not a commonly used app in the Google Suite system. Typically, if teachers are giving students access to Google during the class, they're using things like Google Docs to do assignments in. They could use Google Slides in order to create a presentation. Sometimes they'll even use Google Forms in order to do an exit ticket or a formative assessment. However, typically teachers steer clear of sheets because it's something that they themselves have not have a lot of practice with. And so the biggest way to fix this is by doing a flipped class video. I'm already planning on using flipped class videos to explain basic concepts so that students have a better understanding when they come to class. So this would be one of those things where students would sit down, watch a 5 to 10 minute video that I've created that would help them set up their Sheets document before they even came to class and did the lab. Again, what that's going to allow me to do is not use class time in order to get all the students on the same page with all the features that they will be using for Google Sheets. So while it's not something they could use, it is a quick fix. You could do many different things to get students ready to use it. So it's really not that much of a weakness. So in conclusion, basically this lesson is melding content knowledge with technology, and then at the same time also using it to produce an authentic learning experience in which they can use skills that they would use in the future. And that's why this lesson meets all of the criteria for the ITSE standard number 1, which basically is allowing students to use technology to do an authentic learning experience, to give them the skills they would need to be successful in a later career.